Just to run through quickly then the pros and cons of having a hair transplant in Turkey. This is specifically really the idea of having a hair transplant more so than the type of procedure which I'm going to come on to in other videos. So basically, thinking about Clinicana specifically, the pro side is that they are an extremely experienced clinic. They're using the absolute latest techniques. They've got some extremely highly qualified and experienced people at the helm. And they're performing dozens of procedures per week with still a fantastic reputation, literally thousands of 5-star reviews. So, really, really outstanding reputation. It's a lot cheaper, if you're going out to Turkey generally, it's a lot cheaper. Clinicana certainly is, I would say, probably 1/10 of the cost. It depends how many grafts that you actually have. But I had 3,800 grafts, and that would have cost me maybe 10 times more than it would have done here in the UK. It's similar, around Europe, the US, Canada, etc. as well. The results are outstanding. I'm extremely happy with my own results, and just people who were out there, other people that were getting hair transplants were all happy. I can see all the reviews, spoken to other people that have used them, and everyone is just very, very happy with the results. And of course, I think the main pro of just getting it done is that you get your hair back, and it just feels so fantastic to be able to style your hair again and getting the compliments and just feeling younger and just better about yourself is just obviously a massive pro. So on the con side then, just thinking about if you weren't using Clinicana, you just need to be super, super careful. There are still horror stories out there. Whatever you do, don't go and get like a €500 hair transplant. You'll end up in someone's basement and things will go wrong ultimately. So just be super, super careful. So that is one of the cons. I guess you've got a higher chance of getting a better service, locally, like in the UK or the US or wherever. But there's no guarantees. Things will still go wrong in the UK. Absolutely, they will. But they are probably more likely to go wrong if you go to the wrong clinic in, places like Turkey. So just being careful, that is something to be mindful of, is the fact that, not all clinics are the same in Turkey, for sure. There are some elite clinics and there are some absolutely terrible clinics. So just make sure that you get the right clinic. You've got to factor in travel time and things as well. That's obviously a bit of a negative. So, it's not just a case of being able to just drive somewhere locally. You've got to think about, a few nights stay over in Istanbul, etc. You've got to factor in the price of those flights and evening meals as well. I'll come on to all the costs in another video as well. But just, that extra bit of time that you might be away from home needs to be factored in. So one thing with Clinicana specifically is that although everything flows really nicely, like they transfer you from the airport to the clinic and then around to the hotel and things like that, everything runs really smoothly. When I first arrived in Istanbul, the transfer, whilst it was all kind of organised well and it flowed quite nicely, there were 3 other guys that were coming from the airport, so myself plus 3 others. And the transfer was in a car which wasn't the biggest of cars, and so there was kind of 4 blokes basically squeezed into this car, and it just wasn't the most comfortable transfer that I've ever had. And to be honest, that's the only negative thing I could say about my entire experience with Clinicana, was that airport transfer. It was fine. There was 3 of us in the back, 1 in the passenger seat in the front, and obviously there was the driver in the car as well. So, it wasn't like a horrendous journey or anything, but I was just a bit squeezed in. Funnily enough, the transfer back from the hotel back to the airport, once I'd had my hair transplant done and I was flying home, that transfer was amazing. We got this like pimped up minibus with leather seats and like strip lighting, and it felt like a party bus. It was absolutely fantastic. So I don't know whether I was just unlucky from the airport. I don't want to make too much of a big deal because you might actually end up getting the minibus. I don't really know why we ended up in this car. It just wasn't the best. It wasn't the best start, but everything after that was absolutely fantastic. So that was, like, as I say, the only negative. Everything with regards to the hair transplant was great. The only other thing that I mentioned, and I do mention this again later in the course as well, is that on the day of the procedure, you basically, you're in a clinic, which is, it's a large building, almost like a private hospital almost, and they have one area of this clinic for themselves. Halfway through the procedure, you have a break and they give you a bit of lunch. The lunch isn't great, I'll be honest. It is a bit like hospital food, because ultimately that's where you are, in like a private hospital, as I say. So that's the only other negative really, was that lunch. But at the hotel, the food was great. The breakfast was really good. The dinner was really good. So, and I wasn't that hungry anyway on the day of the procedure. So it was fine. But I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can in this whole course. The two things that I would say brought down the overall standard of everything were that first airport transfer and the lunch on the day of the procedure in the clinic itself. They're the only two things that I can say. Everything else went swimmingly, and even up to this point, after 6 months, there's nothing else negative I can say about the clinic. So the last kind of downside I would say about having a hair transplant overall is the recovery time afterwards. So in the build up to having my hair transplant, I was worried about the actual procedure and getting the right clinic and things like that, right? Which I think is only natural. Hopefully I can give you more comfort than I had around that build-up phase and like booking the right clinic, obviously with Clinicana, etc. And that hopefully alleviates a lot of that kind of worry. One thing I hadn't really thought too much about was that initial recovery time, because you have a period of about 2 to 3 months, and that was probably the hardest time out of the whole period. Not on the build-up, not the day of the procedure. The hardest time was afterwards, when you've had your hair transplant, you've got to go through this healing phase, and you basically end up with like a bit of a red bald scalp for a little while, because after you've had the hair transplant, it's very, very common, and certainly what happened with me is after a week or two after the transplant, the hair then sheds and falls out, and then it starts a new growth cycle, which takes quite a long time. Plus you get like redness on the scalp and things as well. So in that period, as I say, it's about 1 to 3 month period, depending on each individual is different. You have you've got to cover it up with a cap, and I would say you don't want to be having like any black tie dinners or anything like, where you can't wear some sort of hat really, unless I suppose you could go like flat cap and go for like the Peaky Blinders look if you wanted to do that and still look smart and wear a hat. But you're probably going to feel like a bit of a muppet really for those few months, because your head doesn't look great, and so that is probably the biggest downside of having a hair transplant, is that first couple of month period where your hair sheds and you've just got a red head, and that's the time when people are going to look and go, what's he done there? What's he done to that head? Whereas once it starts to come in, and once you get to like 4 or 5 months and your hair's coming back, and you've got this fantastic hairline, it's completely opposite. Then people are like, wow. But yeah, it's just that first recovery time, just to be kind of mentally prepared for the fact that it's not going to look great during that period of time. So that's it. That's as honest as I can be about the pros and cons as I've seen and as I've experienced it. But obviously we're going to deep dive into the whole experience. I want you to know kind of everything to expect, what to happen from start to finish. So we're going to deep dive in the next few videos.